All right, today is June 6th, 2005, and today's session, sponsored by ICF High Country and ICF San Diego, is preparing for the ICF exam with Uta Rodhe. Uh, and Uta is a master's certified coach, an advanced certified mentor coach. She offers mentor coaching and facilitates classes towards renewing and upleveling our ICF exam, which is why we're here today. And she lives in Sedona, Arizona. And I will go ahead and turn that over to you.
Thank you. Um, I love in every one of the classes that I do, if you can take ourselves off mute for a moment and just say good morning to each other.
Good morning.
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 Morning,
Morning,
everyone.
everyone.
Isn't that the nicest thing to just know this kind of energy to begin with? The other thing that I do is I start with a practice. And this practice serves to set you into the mindset of a coach. So it basically fulfills one of the really important ingredients in being a coach is being in the mindset of a coach. And I have done this workshop quite a few times, maybe 400 to 500 people that have passed, and I got a lot of feedback. And many people have reported back that the day before the exam or even before the ICF exam, they just listened to the first 15 minutes of this to set themselves into the mindsets of coaching. And so that's something that I would encourage you to do. And so let's do this together. So allow your eyes to close or softly lower your gaze, whichever is more comfortable to you at this time. And then I invite you to take a few deep diaphragmatic breaths, breathing in through the nose, breathing in presence, whatever is here for you now. Breathing all the way down, expanding diaphragm and belly. And on the out breath, breathe out through your mouth and letting go of any residual tension. If there is any tension left in the body, you can even take a stretch and then find a position that is both comfortable and allows you to be alert. And then allow your eyes to close or softly lower your gaze. And settle in your natural breathing rhythm now. Feel for that sense of settledness. Resting within yourself. Being in contact with your presence. And aligning with a being space of presence, safety, and trust. Let's step into coaching mindset now. A mindset that is open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. Mindset in which you show up as spacious, transparent, and open. Mindset in which you acknowledge that clients are responsible for their own choices and you are curious about your clients. Where you remain curious about your clients, the who, and their circumstances and choices, their what. Coaching mindset where you step into the observer and are aware of your judgment and biases, where you are in self management and you choose to remain aware of and open to the influence of context and culture of yourself and others. The more to just tune in, what is this like to be in a coaching mindset? Just notice what shifted in your presence. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And I want to invite you to take a few notes. What are you sensing when you align with presence, trust, and safety? What are you sensing when you are aligned with client centeredness versus coach centeredness? What is that like? And energetically, where are you at when you are curious and asking the client versus leading the conversation and telling? What's it like to follow a client's lead? What's it like to be in self management? A space where you show up transparent and vulnerable, yet have agency of your own thoughts and feelings. One last question that goes directly to the heart of our core competency, too. What is it like to embody a coaching mindset? If you want to leave a note in the chat of there's anything that you discovered during this practice that was valuable for you, put a note in the chat if you want to. When you do that, I'm going to say a little bit about how we're going to operate today. I'm going to start with giving you a bit of an overview of the general info that you need to know about the ICF exam. And then we're going to go into the knack of how to pass it. And there really is a knack. And we're going to start with the ACC exam. And then the last part of our presentation today, we're going to go into what's called the ICF exam, the exam that you take at PCC level and at MCC level. If you want to, you can read along in the chat. Let go of the state of being versus doing, renewed generosity with deep sense of purpose, service, no agenda, a lack of pressure. It's about being in peace, curious, prepared for the unexpected with a beginner's mind. Yes. And this is so natural for us. You know, we set ourselves into this coaching mindset in every conversation that we have. But it really has made a big difference for most people that have been taking this workshop to be in that coaching mindset when you answer the questions or the scenarios in the exam, because they are, whether it's ACC exam or the PCC MCC exam, it's the same thing. They are asking scenarios that happen naturally in coaching conversations and for you to respond as a coach. So setting yourself in a coaching mindset before you go into the exam has been proven a good choice for many people. All right. I'm going to go straight into the neck. And I'm going to go back into the neck at the end of the class today. But I'm going to show you in a slide what are the most important things for you to know in order to pass either one or both of these exams. So give me a moment. I'm going to show you that in a slide. And we're going to go through each one of them during this 3-hour class. So there are some links that I'm going to put into the chat, but what is the most important thing, and I'm also going to put that in the chat, is reflect on what does it look like when the coaching core competencies are effectively demonstrated by a coach versus when they are not effectively demonstrated by a coach. That is what the ICF is saying about this exam. So knowing the text of the core competencies renewed in 2019 is going to give you a very clear line of what you're being tested on in the ICF exam. And there you have a yes, no choice, or in the ACC exam where you only have to find the best choice. So what the ICF is saying about the ICF exam, I'm going to repeat this one more time. What does it look like when the coaching core competencies are effectively demonstrated by a coach versus when they're not effectively demonstrated by a coach? And education and practice, being in a coaching mindset are really the best prep for the main ICF exam. And here are the ingredients that really go into this recipe that help you pass successfully. One, know the ICF core competency, know the languaging of it. And we're going to go into why knowing the languaging of it is really important. B, in a coaching mindset, which we just did in the practice, know your timing in answering the 78 questions in the ICF exam or the fewer questions in the ACC exam. Feel confident about your technology and know the knack of applying the ICF core competencies to practical scenarios. Those are the ingredients that truly go into passing. Was that a question?
It was someone not on mute. It's taken care of.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, I don't want to post everyone in the meeting. Okay, here we go. So if you want to copy and paste that, these ingredients go into you passing the exam with confidence. And we're going to go through each one of them, and we're going to lock that in. And I'm most likely going to mention that again at the end of our workshop today. So there are different conditions for the ICF exam versus the ACC exam. And I'm just for simplicity going to call the ICF exam the exam that is for people that apply for PCC and MCC. I'm going to call the ACC exam the exam that you register for when you want to take your ACC. It was up to this month, or like I think last month, possible to choose either exam at ACC level. But I think from last month on, when you are applying for ACC, you're automatically going to be enrolled in the ACC exam. And so there are changes that have happened in the last year. This has been in place, I think, since August of 2022 or 23. And in the beginning, there was no bio break. So there were more scenarios and less bio breaks. And, wasn't really with coaches in mind. And so Pearson VUE is not a coaching organization. This is really important for us to keep in mind. They test on all sorts of things. They test us for, driving tests or for foreign language tests. So they have a lot of standardized tests. And the advantage that the ICF was seeking when they hired Pearson VUE to kind of run these tests is to standardize the test. And on the other hand, we find ourselves with Pearson VUE in a little bit less coach-like environment. And that is good to keep in mind when you approach this. What has also changed in the last couple of years for those of you that have taken the ICF exam before, there is more expanded score report that give you information across the exam domains, which empowers you, to have additional information for your study and preparation. And there's also an online tutorial on how to pass the ICF exam. So there's way more information now online on the ICF's website than there used to be before. And I just want to look that up for a moment. I'm going to put something else in the chat for you with 2 links where you can find a lot of information about the ICF exam. So there's a few feedbacks that we've gotten. And, like as I said, I have done this for 450, 500 people, this particular class, and I've heard, thankfully, a lot of feedback. And, I invite you to give me feedback. If you learn something in the ICF exam that we haven't covered today that you want to highlight for others, I always love getting the feedback. Pretty much everybody that has taken this workshop has passed the ICF exam. Yes, I'm going to go into that, Kathy, what the advantage is taking it home or, taking it as a Pearson VUE center. So I'm going to go into that in a moment. What we've learned, about the ICF exam so far, most of us perceive it as quote unquote intense. Know that there is no food permitted, only a bottle of water. And if you take the ICF exam at home, ACC or ICF exam, you are asked to submit 4 photos of the sides of your room, and you're being instructed not to look at the ceiling. And there is technical requirements. So I had one person actually fail because she didn't download some, outlet that she needed to be functioning for their person view format. And then she didn't have enough time. So the question for you that you have to answer for yourself is, how technically versatile do you feel? So if you find yourself nervous about technology, or if you are somebody that looks up at the ceiling when you are considering asking a question in your own brain, you can't do that at home. There is a little bit of more of a looseness when you go to a Pearson View Center because you have a support team there. Somebody, like if you run into technical difficulties, you can at any moment in time call a staff member over and they help you. So some restrictions that apply to you when you are taking the exam at home do not apply to you when you are at a Pearson View Center. And so you have to gauge yourself. Am I, you know, gadget friendly? Do I love technology? Do I not have a problem with that? Or would I feel more safe and grounded if I went to a test center? And then the experience that I've heard from a lot of people arriving there about half an hour early, really getting yourself settled in an unknown, circumstance, has helped many people to overcome nervousness. That's right. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more, Christina.
May I second that, Uta? Do you mind? Is that okay? Can I talk?
Say it again?
Uta? Yeah, Xavier here. Can I second with what you said, which was totally my experience of going into a center and feeling much more at peace because I thought the home requirements were so tremendous. I was afraid of doing a mistake and just, failing the exam just because of an unconscious mistake. And I totally second what you said. In the center, I felt totally at peace, totally centered, totally focused, and really with more freedom than at home, which sounds like a paradox, but it was very much the case. Thank you for that.
Yes. Thank you. It's nice to have another MCC in here. So, like, we're going to approach the questions later from different levels. And so, having a fellow MCC in here is always a nice thing. So, there is a prep how you go about the Pearson View exam. And I'm going to put that again into the chat. There is a link that you can copy. And I think when you go to Pearson View, yes, you get to choose your time. I think, once you finish your application, your ICF application, there is a certain window in which you will have to take the test. And then, within that window, you will have to find a time with Pearson View where you can take the test. So taking the exam is really to decide whether to take the test online or in person. When taking the test online at home, perform a system check, refresh your computer, close other applications, do a system check before taking the exam and prepare your space. If taking the test in person, allow for ample time and be well rested. Make sure you have your ID with you because you'll need it. And check in my suggestion from the feedback that I received from others, and check in half an hour before the scheduled time. And for both options, online and in person, read the instructions thoroughly. There's some rules for testing at home. You have to stay in view of the webcam at all times. Your testing space must be well lit. You cannot communicate with anyone else other than the proctor. No one may enter or pass through your testing space, and you cannot read the questions aloud. So, that is considered like maybe if there's somebody around that can give you feedback or whatever. Anyway, you cannot read your questions out loud. And thankfully, we are now getting a bio break. So there is a 5-minute break scheduled midway through this or exam period. And this scheduled break provides the opportunity for candidates to take a brief pause from their computer-based test. What is important for you is you cannot come back and answer a question from before you took the break. So by the time you take the break, you have to have answered all the questions that are coming in before the break. And this is something I'm maybe repeating later, but I just want to mention it to you now. For the ICF exam, the bigger exam, you have 2 minutes on average, 2 minutes and a quarter to read the question. And most of us need around 45 seconds to 1 minute to just read the question. And we're going to test this out later. So you have basically 1 minute, a little bit over a minute, to make a decision on the best and worst answer. So saving a question for later doesn't make a lot of sense because you're really going to be having to make decisions on the spot. And in some ways, that makes sense because this is what we do in our daily practice. When we're in our coaching practice on a call, we also make these decisions in the moment. And trusting your instinct, because it's really based on two things: your knowledge of the ICF core competencies and the language of it, and your practice experience. So these scenarios are given to you in a way that normal scenarios would happen to you in your coaching practice as well. I've heard back from people that saved a few questions for later. It didn't go well because they ran out of time in the end. And PSNU and the ICF have become kinder about the tests that they were in the beginning. In the beginning, we had 81 scenarios, so even less time. Now it's 78 scenarios for the ICF exam, and it is less for the ACC exam. And we're going to go in there in a moment. Okay, let's kind of look at that. There are exam accommodations, and I'm going to show you the slide on that. There are certain things that allow you to deal with, neurodiversity or unique challenges that you may have in body or mind. So when you have a documented disability and other qualifying medical conditions, you may request an accommodation in the application form. So the exam accommodation form must be submitted prior to scheduling an exam appointment. There's a variety of accommodations available, including extended exam time, a separate testing room, getting a reader. Like, for example, if you are blind, there are coaches that are very successful and they're blind, but they obviously cannot read what's on the screen. An adjustable workstation, touchpad, or trackball mouse, depending on your body's requirement. Zoom text for some people that may have diabetes or other physical challenges, snacks or medical devices, and or frequent or extended breaks if your body needs that. So the one requirement here is that you have to put that into your requests before you actually get to the schedule of your exam. But it's good to know that that is available if you need it. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the structure of both the ICF exam and then also into the ACC exam. You have 180 minutes, like as of today, to answer 78 scenarios. And again, it's getting kinder. It's 3 less than we had to do like a year ago. That means you have exactly 2.3 minutes for each scenario. I counted this out. This was really important because the feedback that I got from applicants was, I did not pass because I ran out of time. And I ran out of time because I overconsidered instead of just trusting my gut instinct and going with it. That is why it is very important for you to understand the knack of how to pass it, which is what we're going to deal with today. So that those 2.2 minutes actually include the reading time. And later on in our presentation, I'm actually going to time you to know how fast you are reading on a few scenarios so that you can gauge this for yourself. Wow, I needed 45 seconds, or for this scenario, I needed 1 minute to just read the scenario. And some of them are really long. So keep that in mind when you consider time spent on each scenario that you don't feel clear about. Thankfully, what the Pearson VUE test is doing now, they are including somewhere on the screen how much time you have left. That wasn't available before, and it made some people really nervous. So now you have a clear signal from their side, you have this much time left. And most people actually need almost all the time to do their exam. The average completion time is 170 minutes. So the average person taking the test has about 10 minutes left, which is a good sign. Again, you're not allowed to go back and answer any questions from the first half of the questions after your break. The exam pass rate for the first attempt is about 76% of people pass the test the first time around. Of all candidates, and this is like old data, this data was not renewed, so this data is from like 1.5 years ago. Of all candidates who have completed the ICF credentialing exam, which is the big exam, over 90% earned their credential. And the passing rate, it is interestingly was the same on the ICF exam. That was before the ACC exam. 91% of all ACCs passed, 91.4% of all PCC passed, and we only have a very small number of MCCs that took the test before this data was available, because we did that as a pilot. So for MCCs, there was a time when we were taking this as a pilot to earn a few extra credits when they were bringing the test out first. So the 93 percentile was for the MCCs taking the test. So you see it's a very high passing quote. And what I've experienced with people that have given feedback after they did the workshop with me was almost all scenarios where a person didn't pass was based on running out of time or not trusting themselves in answering the questions ad hoc, and or doing the test at home, looking at the ceiling, or feeling technically not grounded in their testing at home, and that has led them then to go into a testing center. So those were the two main reasons why people actually didn't pass the exam that I got as a feedback. The exam, so the structure is the exam instructions are about 2 minutes in the ICF exam. For the first section, you have 39 minutes. You have a scheduled break of about 10 minutes, and then 39 minutes for the second part of the ICF exam. And I'm going to share with you the content domain, and this is very different for the ACC and the ICF exams. So in the ICF exam, which is the exam that you take when you apply for PCC and then again for MCC, the content domain, we really have those 4 domains. And, like, again, you're being tested on your knowledge of the core competencies. It's the foundation, co-creating the relationship, communicating effectively, and cultivating learning and growth. And so in the foundation, you have competency 1 and 2, which is ethics and embodying a coaching mindset. And so I would recommend there is new ethics instructions. So the whole ethic manual that the ICF puts out has changed a couple of months ago, to really sit down and read the new ethics instructions before you take the exam. This is a great practice. even more so in the ACC exam, because in the ACC exam, 30 to 40% are based on core competency 1 and 2. So really knowing what is said to you in core competency 1 ethics is important to study. And 12% about core competency 2, embodying a coaching mindset. And this is something that we did in the practice when we started this morning, really using the first, before you go into the test, kind of using 10 minutes and really resetting yourself into a coaching mindset will put you in the right space to basically answer the scenarios. And then, as you can see, very equally in the ICF exam for the PCC and MCC, very equally slotted, 12 or 13% the questions in each one of the core competencies, which is very different from the ACC exam. And I just want to kind of show you the ACC exam content. So for the ACC exam content, you basically look at the domain number 1, coaching ethics. 30% of the questions are focused on ethics. 30% are definition and boundaries of coaching, which is being a coach, not a therapist, a counselor, a parent, and all of these other roles. Like, what does it mean to be in a coaching mindset? So 30% are engaged toward being in a coaching mindset. And then the other 40% are coaching competencies, strategies, and techniques. So as you can see in the ACC exam, a much bigger weight is going toward the foundations. And in many ways, that makes a lot of sense, because I'm going to read that in the chat in a moment. But let me just say that makes perfect sense. So my thoughts on this, without having checked this, these are just my thoughts or interpretations. At some moment in time, most likely the ICF saw that as an ACC or as an ACC applicant, you have about 100 coaching hours. That means you don't have the richness of 500 or 2,500 coaching hours PCC, MCC to be able to go into a lot of coaching scenarios, because you simply don't have the experience. And so to have something that is more simple and test you just on, do you understand the ethics? Do you understand what it is to be a coach? And then test you on the basics, 40% of the test on coaching core competencies was a much better split on an ACC level. Wired internet, Wi-Fi at home if you can, says Xavier. Ethics can't be emphasized enough, because a lot of questions, scenarios are related to ethics in one way or another. Exactly. Can you put the slide in the chat, the ACC content? That is online. So, I'm going to give you a link in a moment to the whole ACC tutorial. And these kind of data you find in the tutorial. I'm going to give you the link where you find that online. But basically, core competency 1, 2, you have 60% of the weight on foundation. Again, one of the handouts that you're going to get is the updated core competencies. The languaging of the updated core competencies, if you wanted to do any prep for your ICF exam, is read this document. If you read this document 5, 10 times and you're really familiar with it, you're getting more in touch with the neck, because a lot of the questions are asked in the language of the core competency. And remember what I said to you about the neck in that highlighted area that you have in the chat. What the ICF says about both exams, what does it look like when the coaching core competencies are effectively demonstrated by a coach versus when they're not effectively demonstrated by a coach? So many of us, when we kind of take the ACC, we come from coaching schools that have their own methodology and their own languaging. And so at some moment in time, when you start your career with the ICF, becoming comfortable and actually knowing the languaging that the ICF uses is going to come in super, super helpful in passing the exams and also passing, the auditory requirement or, session requirements that you have to present. Let me see whether I can copy this whole thing. It's online. I hope it takes the whole text. Jennifer, when you say and PCC, please, what are you saying?
She had asked about the slide for the ACC exam, and I was just requesting the PCC as well, but I'll get it from the website.
Yes, you can. Let me see whether I can copy paste it. I hope that the text is not too long. Oh, I have to do it in 2 parts. Hang on. I'm going to cut this out. So that was the ACC. And then, for the PCC and MCC, it was really the same amount for each core competency. So for each of the 8 competencies, you have the same 12 to 13%. I'm putting that in here. And so this is for the PCC and MCC. All right. So I'm going to go a little bit into the ACC exam structure, which is a little bit different from the bigger exam. The tutorial for that, I'm also going to put in the chat for you. The whole ACC tutorial, you can find it here. And the structure of the ICF ACC exam, which from what I gather in the text, in the chat, I just want to do a hand raise real quick. How many of you are preparing for ACC exam? It's a lot of you. Great. And how many of you are preparing for the ICF exam? That is actually lesser. Okay, thank you so much for confirming that with me. So the ACC exam is rather important for our class today. It has 60 multiple choice questions. Each item includes a brief prompt or a question with 4 response options, and we're going to go through 10 example questions. There's only 1 correct response for each item. The ACC exam consists of 2 sections with an optional 10-minute break midway through the exam. So one, it's much shorter. It is, 2 times 40 minutes. So altogether 80 minutes with a 10-minute break, which makes it 90, and exam instructions of 2 minutes. I'm going to put that in the chat for you. So this is the structure of the ACC exam. So the exam time is 90 minutes, which includes the 10-minute break, and it includes 60 multiple choice questions. And, from what I've heard so far from people with the ACC exam, they didn't find it difficult to pass. Most people thought it was intense time-wise, but most people also thought it was not super challenging to pass it. Do we have anyone here that recently passed the ACC exam? No, Nikki, that is not the same timing. As I mentioned before, the ICF exam is 180 minutes. So it has, 78 scenarios. It is longer in its structure. Is there anyone in here that recently passed or has passed the ACC exam?
I passed mine last July, so it's gonna be almost a year, but it was the new one, the new version.
So what is the experience of it?
Uh, It was intense, definitely, and yes, I was so nervous about the time management. So I just kind of really kind of set my own goals of where did I want it to be by the first half. Try to read as fast as possible, and then just go with my gut instead of second guessing.
Yes.
So can I clarify something real quick? So Susie, if you took it last July, that was then the PCC ICF exam, not the new ACC exam that launched in
Ah,
November. That's just the
got it. Okay,
so
well
you
then
took
I
the harder
guess.
one.
Okay, well then I
Yes.
guess I'm ready for the PCC because that's the one I'm preparing for. I already went through that.
If I'm not mistaken. So you had the worst and best.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. No, the
yes.
ACC exam is a 60 multiple choice question. So that's the difference.
Totally missed that part. Then no, never mind.
Yeah. Fortunately, some of us that are deeply into mentor coaching, we actually requested to be able to take the ACC exam because we wanted to gauge it first in experience, right? And we have not yet been granted that wish. For some of us as mentor coaches, it would be actually really, really helpful to take it to be able to share the experience with our mentees, but that hasn't happened, at least not so far. Okay, so there is a hand up. Didn't miss it.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yes.
Really quick, I am going through the portfolio method to get my certification, and I have a lot of coaching hours. So from what I read, I have the ability to skip the ACC and go straight to the PCC if I choose. Is that just wanted to confirm that that's still the same?
That is still the same. So if you have more than 500 coaching hours, you can choose to kind of take PCC over ACC, and why wouldn't you? The prerequisite, this is not the same for MCC, so you have to have a PCC before you can apply for MCC, but you do not have to have the ACC certification in order to go to PCC. That's the status right now. All right. Again, so like here, if you missed that before, here is the full ACC guide, the whole tutorial on the ICF exam. And I also want to give you where Pearson VUE has published their information so that you can have those two tutorials and you can look into them before you actually do anything with their center. What we're going to do now is we're going to go and spend the next 45 minutes to an hour on passing the ACC exam. And from what I gathered, most of the people in today's workshop are actually applying for ACC. So this is going to give you great, it's going to be a great help engaging what it is that you're being asked for. So we're going to go through 10 sample questions. And they are representative of the types of questions that you may be asked in the ACC exam. What these questions are designed to measure is your knowledge of the ICF Core Competencies, the ICF Code of Ethics, and the definition of coaching. And again, you're going to get these documents as a handout. Now, there is one more handout that you're going to get in an email, which is the PCC markers. I would suggest that you don't need those for the ACC exam, but you should definitely read the languaging of the PCC markers if you want to take the ICF exam, which is for PCC MCC. The most important document, and I just want to say this the third and fourth time, for you to read several times in their languaging, because the languaging is repeated in the way that the questions come at you in the test, is the ICF Core Competencies and the ICF Ethics. If you have the languaging of those two documents, many of the questions that you're going to receive are going to sound really, really obvious because many of the questions are directly phrased in the same way as the core competencies are phrased. And again, I read that to you earlier. That is what you're being tested on. Your understanding of ethics, being in a coaching mindset, and the core competencies. Those are the three legs that you stand on when you take your ACC. So that really goes into knowing the knack. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a question up on the screen. I'm going to have you read it, and then we're going to answer questions. And so I'm going to give you sample questions number 1 and number 2. I'm going to give you a little time to read them and then make up your mind what your answers is, and maybe write down A, B, C, D, whatever it is that you want to answer here. And then we're going to go in what you answered, what the correct answer is, and also why that is the correct answer by relating that to the core competencies, okay? All right, here's your question, sample question number 1 and sample question number 2. And I'm going to give you a little bit of time to read them. Alrighty, I assume that gave you enough time to read question number 1 and 2. And the best way to do that is in a discussion format. So, like if you feel you have an answer to it, just take yourself off mute. I'm going to put the document up in a moment, and tell us why you chose a certain answer. Not only that you chose that answer, but also why you chose it. What core competency do you think it was related to? So I'm going to put the document back up. And then any one of you that wants to take this question, just take yourself off mute and let's unpack this together. Hoping for somebody courageous.
I'll be courageous.
Okay, awesome. And that is Bryony or Bryony? How do you?
Bryony.
Bryony, thank you.
So for the first one, I chose B, engaging in a romantic relationship with a client. And my best guess for the core competency would be the ethics.
Yes. Perfect. And so what is unethical about engaging in a romantic relationship with the client?
Well, you would not be able to remain neutral and be able to support your client if you were in a romantic relationship with them.
Yes, for example, I'm married to you and I'm coaching you into washing the dishes every day. So great answer. So like the link to core competency 1, ethics, right? Thank you so much, Bryony. That was an obvious one. Who wants to take question number 2?
Sure, I'll take question number 2. I answered C for question number 2, because again, it's all about confidentiality. It doesn't matter if you're handwriting your notes or typing your notes. What matters is that nobody else has access to your notes.
Awesome. And what core competency does that honor?
That's also tied into our ethics.
Yes. Thank you for that, Christina. So you can see, again, like 30% are ethics questions, 30% are you a coach, core competency 2 questions, and only 40% of the ACC really go in there. Let's kind of look at what the ICF says to that. And indeed, we got it right. Engaging in a romantic relationship is not ethical. And, in a secure format that promotes client confidentiality is the most important thing for storing client notes. All right, here comes number 3 and 4. And I'm actually going to read them out. Number 3, a coach accepts a new client who values the coach's industry work experience. Which is the best action for the coach to take? Offer the coach's advice based on their industry work experience. B, clarify the distinction between coaching and consulting. C, provide the coach's credentials in the industry. Or D, suggest engagement goals for the client based on the coach's industry experience. What's your hunch on question number 3? Again, anyone that wants to take it on, just take yourself off mute.
I would say B, clarify the distinction between coaching and consulting.
And why would you choose B? JB, is that right? JB?
Javi.
Javi, thank you.
Yes, from core competency number 1 of clarifying the difference between coaching and consulting.
Yes, perfect. And also comes in here, maybe coaching competency number 2, be a coach, so have boundaries with other professions, as in consulting, teaching, and knowing that that also comes in here. So both 1 and 2. Next question. What is a key difference between coaching and facilitation? A, coaching involves giving direct advice, while facilitation focuses on asking questions. B, coaching is primarily for personal development, while facilitation is only for professional settings. C, coaching is a thought-provoking and creative process to support a client to meet their full potential, while facilitation is about guiding group discussions. Or D, coaching requires a license to practice, while facilitation is not. I'm seeing some smiles, so it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Who wants to take this one on? Anyone courageous?
I'm happy to do it again, but I want to give others a chance.
Go ahead, Bryony. You were smiling with this biggest smile, so you obviously got a kick out of this one.
Yeah, number C would be my answer.
Go ahead.
And I don't remember what the answer, what C was. It was something about being the coaching being the creative process.
Yes, a thought-provoking and creative process to support a client to meet their full potential, while facilitation is about guiding group discussions.
Yeah.
And so, what core competency do you have that under?
Oh, I didn't get that far. So maybe someone else who got the same answer could answer that.
What would you guys think? What core competency does that go under?
That would be, I'm thinking A, the foundation for embodying a coaching mindset.
Yes, so that is a foundation and it is core competency 2. We're going to do this more later on in the ICF exam, but I do have them here. So let's kind of go in here for a moment. Actually, let's go into 1 and 2, because all the questions that have been asked so far in the exam are directly related to 1 and 2. So let me share this with you. And then you have that in your handout. The core competency number 1 is ethics. So personal integrity and honesty in interaction with clients, sponsors, and stakeholders. sensitivity to clients' identity, environment, experience, values, and beliefs, appropriate language and respectful to clients, sponsors, and relative stakeholders, abiding by the ICF Code of Ethics and upholding core values, maintaining confidentiality with client information per stakeholder agreements and pertinent laws, maintaining the distinction between coaching, consulting, psychotherapy, and other support professions, which is what was named here several times, point 6, right? Referring client to other support professionals as appropriate. And again, this is from the updated Core Competencies 2019. And then the other core competencies that came so far in was core competency 2, also part of the foundation, as you just said. And the definition is develops and maintains a mindset that is open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. And that was the language that I used in the opening practice today. Acknowledges that a client is responsible for their own choices, engages in ongoing learning and development as a coach, develops an ongoing reflective practice to enhance one's coaching, remains aware of and open to the influence of context and culture on self and others, uses awareness of self and one's intuition to benefit the clients, develops and maintains the ability to regulate one's emotions, self-management, mentally and emotionally prepares for sessions, and seeks help from outside when necessary. So basically the questions here have been forming around develops and maintains a mindset that is open, curious, flexible, and client-centered, and knowing your boundaries with other coaching competencies. So core competency 1 and core competency 2 came in these questions so far.
Uta, I'm going to put the updated core competencies in the chat, the
Yes.
document.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
You have them as a handout. If you want to follow along, having them open, that might also be a good choice. Let me find the slide that we're looking at. Okay, we're going to sample questions 5 and 6, and I'm going to put them up on the screen again for you. The sample question 5 and 6 for the ACC exam. Question number 5. After 2 months of a 6-month coaching engagement, a client begins missing appointments and not following through on agreed upon actions. What is the best approach for the coach to take? 1. Terminate the coaching agreement immediately. 2. Ignore the issue for now and hope the client gets back on track. C. Refer the client to a colleague who may be a better fit. D. Explore with the client whether or not to continue with the coaching. Anyone courageous wants to take this one on?
I'll take it.
Yes.
D.
Explore with the client whether or not to continue with coaching. Why did you take that, Susie?
Well, from all the choices, it seems that this one is more about having the conversation with the client, being curious about what's going on, and figuring out if they're really invested or not, instead of just making the assumption.
Fantastic. The first 3 are making assumptions about the client. Well, they're not a good fit for me. Ignoring it's their choice. They were going to go on track, but I'm going to ignore it. I'm not going to be curious about it. Terminating, I'm going to make the choice. And what you really are embodying here is client-centeredness. I'm going to be curious about what my client is going through in regards of their accountability and what is maybe a new design that we want to both engage in as far as holding accountability is about. Let's take number 6. A client asks the coach for advice about how to carry out a new challenging assignment. What is the best action for the coach to take? Give the client the requested advice. Suggest that the client ask their supervisor for advice. Send the client an email after the coaching session with several strategies the client could consider. Or D, explain the distinction between coaching and consulting and invite the client to identify strategies they could explore together. Anyone wanting to take that one on?
I'll take this one on.
Awesome.
D, explain the distinction between coaching and consulting.
And why did you opt for that one, Sonia?
It falls right in line. Well, the others are, it seems obvious, but also it falls in line with core competency 3, establish and maintains agreements.
Perfect. So thank you for naming the core competency 3. Also, boundaries between consulting, coaching is core competency 2B in a coaching mindset. Yes. So 2 and 3 are really, really obvious. And then also 1 is coming in here, ethics. So this one actually goes into several domains. Let's see whether we got it right. Indeed, we did. Clarify the distinction between coaching and consulting on question number 5. And coaching is a thought-provoking and create. Oh, hang on. This is actually the answer for the info. I made a mistake here. I added the wrong slide. Give me a second. Did I? No, I did not. Sorry about that. I copied a slide wrong, but we got the answers right. It's obvious. Sample question 7. Go ahead. Yes?
I was just going to say, I just posted the ethics, link to the ethics in the chat as well.
Thank you, Veronica. Question number 7. Which of the following represents the most important purpose of silence in coaching? B, to allow a client to process their thoughts. B, to enable the coach and client to hear one another. C, to provide the coach time to think of their next question. D, to provide the client time to think of the right response to the coach's question. Who would like to take that one?
I'll take it. I'm going to say A.
And what makes you choose A, Elizabeth? Thank you.
I don't know, I guess it's just going with my gut here, of course. You know, when somebody is silent and you can just kind of visually see them processing their thoughts. And I would imagine that's a part of the competencies.
Yes. Let me kind of look at the core competency in question. You instinctively chose really well. Core competency number 5. So this is actually a question that goes into the 40% of the other core competencies. Creates or allows space for silence, pause, or reflection. Point 6 in core competency number 5. And exactly right. You know, silence creates a space for the client to deal with an open question and really tune in how they want to answer that in a new way. Very nicely done. Okay, let's go up again. Let me find the right slide. Question number 8. Respecting a client's perception is a critical element of which coaching competency? A, cultivates trust and safety, which is core competency 4. B, listens actively, 6. C, facilitates clients' growth, which is number 8, core competency 8. Or D, establishing and maintains agreements, which is core competency 3. Which element is critical in respecting a client's perception? Trust and safety, listens actively, facilitates client growth, or establishes and maintains agreements?
Can I go?
Yes.
Look, I'm an MCC, I think I would struggle with this question. Because I think, anyway, the client perception is a part of the 4 in a way, one way or another, if you really look, and then the question is really about the criticality of it. So I think that's the sneaky part in the question. So I would go for trust and safety, but not feeling completely sure of what I'm saying. I would say A, but not super sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is so sweet. And you're running into a difficulty. Last year I ran this class with about 10 MCCs because we were looking at, how to facilitate the ICF exam as mentor coaches. And we ran into difficulties because we're like 3 layers in deep and we're negotiating. Is this more like 4?
Yeah,
Is this more like 5? What is this aligned with? And the best way for you as an MCC to approach this, and I saw earlier in the chat, you are wanting to explore that with your own students. The best way for you to explore that is go back to the languaging of the PCC
Core
markers.
competency. Yeah.
If you kind of go with the PCC markers and you tune into the PCC level of taking the test, the test, when you think about it, has to be at PCC level.
Yes.
Not
ICC.
necessarily MCC level.
Of course.
You go back to what many of us MCCs call the science of coaching, which is the PCC marker. So that's the 3rd document that I am giving as a handout. And you and I are going to run into some difficulties or challenges in answering that because we're like 3 levels deep in with the MCC bars. And, the answer that the ICF has given is trust and safety. So I want to pull this up. I'm going to pull up trust and safety and why they are choosing this in core competency 4. Demonstrates respect for the client's identity, perception, style, language, and adapts one's coaching to the client. Seeks to understand the client within their context, which may include their identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs. Acknowledges and supports the client's expressions of feelings, perception, concerns, beliefs, and suggestions. Those go into 4. And so it's the ones that are most deeply linked into this question is probably 2 and 3 of core competency number 4. Yes. And I want to go back to our question 7 and 8. And yes, so what the ICF answers is cultivates trust and safety. And thank you for taking this one, Javier. And I just want to check in for a moment into the chat. Okay, there's the core competencies. Good. Are there any questions before we take 9 and 10? I think for now, okay, let's kind of go ahead and do 9 and 10 with each other. Question number 9. A coach asks the client permission to coach in a new and sensitive area. What is the purpose of this request? A, to allow the client to think through their potential solutions. B, to make the client feel anxious to speed results. C, to create a space where the coach is able to accept negative feedback. D, to create a safe space where the client has a choice.
I'll take this one. I would say D, to create a safe space where the client has a choice.
Thank you, Sadie. Why are you choosing D?
I think for me, it felt like the best choice option because we're client centered. And so having the client guide and lead and they have a choice and creating the safe space, this for me mapped to the cultivating trust and safety.
Yes, absolutely. It matches, for core competency, for trust and safety. And it also goes actually as a coach, what you just named, being client-centered goes into core competency number 2, showing up as a coach, right? Great. Thank you so much. Question number 10. Using metaphors as a coaching tool is most useful in which of the following situations? A, the coach is teaching a concept. B, the coach wants to nuance a message. C, the coach is seeking clarity or meaning. D, the client does not see the coach's perspective. Who wants to take this one?
I'll try it. I'm
Yes.
a little iffy between A and B. I think it's A, as using metaphor as a way to get your point across in a more clear fashion, which aligns with competency, evoking awareness. But the nuance of message is kind of throwing me.
Beautiful. Like, so you really got the core competency, right? Like working with metaphors. The answer is most likely going to be B because the word teaching is kind of there to trip you up a little bit because as a coach, being in your role as a coach, you're not a teacher, right?
Yeah.
So most likely I would hold it that B, the coach wants to nuance a message, goes into that, and part of it also goes into your intuition. Yes. So there is, in evoking awareness and listens deeply and actively, there are ways of bringing in added, structures like metaphors. And so nuancing the message and bringing it a way that is either visual, auditory, or in other ways sensory to nuance the message is most likely the right answer. And let's kind of look at this together. Kind of goes a little bit into recognizing and inquiring where there is more what a client is communicating, where intuition is being brought in. She has observations, insights, and feelings in core competency 7, which you named, evoking awareness, without attachment that have the potential to create new learning for the client. I'm going to stop sharing and see there is a hand up. Yes, Jenna.
Can you explain why the answer is not C?
Okay, let me go
I
back.
would have gone for C too.
Okay, awesome.
I would have gone for seeking clarity and meaning. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me kind of go back to C and let me go back to sharing this. Actually, what the ICF is saying, the client is seeking clarity or meaning, which is interesting. So I would have had it as the coach wants to nuance a message, but actually the ICF is saying exactly C, the client is seeking clarity or meaning. So Javier and Jenna, how do you recognize C as the right answer?
Go, Jenna.
I guess it would be that I don't think it's the coach's role to nuance the message. It's the client who's seeking, and metaphor is just a tool.
Beautifully done. So that was a really beautiful client-centered answer. Do you want to say more to that, Javier?
Yeah, just that when in coaching sessions, when clients are struggling with words and we don't have the same agility with words, it's better to talk through an image, through a metaphor, and then from that metaphor derive a meaning and clarity from it, and getting in the energy of the metaphor and not get stuck with words. So, and again, it was client-centered, so I thought it was C. This is why I thought it was C.
Very nicely done. Thank you so much. Good explanation. Now, before we are going to take a break, which we're going to do in a moment, I want to ask, did any questions come up while we were doing that? Yes, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. So I guess I just want to clarify on the last question, because this was my thought process, is the value of knowing the language, because at no place in any of the PCC markers does it say be willing to accept language, or sorry, feedback, but it says with no attachment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the questions that you're going to get also in the ICF scenarios that we're going to go toward next, they are not exact in the languages, but there is a knack, and we're going to explore that when we get into the ICF exam. Anything else that came up for anyone around the ACC test question? Any other questions or comments?
Maybe one thing, maybe I don't know if I should say that. So first of all, thank you, because you're bringing so much clarity. I just want to applaud you because oh my God, it's so clear. Thanks to you. Point one. But point two is that maybe we need to remind everyone that they don't need to have everything right. If I remember correctly, I don't know about ACC, but there's a PCC, MCC, I mean, we can get some answers wrong. And as you saw just now in these last two examples, sometimes we're a bit in doubt and it's not that a clear cut. So it's okay if you don't have absolutely everything, you can still pass. I think it's also a message that everybody needs to hear. I don't know what you think, Uta, about that.
I think that is exactly right. And, you know, again, I want to emphasize in the neck, there are several things that go into it. And one of them is knowing the languaging of the ICF core competencies. For your ACC exam, that and the ethics is the one preparation that you can take other than practice. And for the ACC exam, it is being taken in consideration that your experience in coaching clients is more or less at around 100 coaching hours. So it isn't expected from you to answer them at the same depth as you're going to see the questions for the ICF exam, which we're going to go next to. And again, thank you for that, you know, Javier. And I just want to say, if you are an MCC or you are applying for your MCC, and there's a couple of people in here that actually are going toward their MCC. As you apply for your MCC, my hunch would be that you really look at the language of the PCC markers as well. Because the language of the PCC markers is going into what many of the MCCs call the science of coaching. So we call the PCC the science of coaching and the MCC the art of coaching. There are different requirements for that. And one of the things that we've discovered as MCCs, that we tend to think 3-level deeps on some of these things and actually answer them in a challenging way. So to kind of study the language of the way that it is being presented to you by the ICF is a huge help in answering these scenarios quickly. And Kathy, you are smiling. Can you tell us why you're smiling?
Yes, because one of my comments, Uta, was, as you pointed out, follow the language. So when I was taking the practice tests, I was thinking of the language of the competencies. And then when you reviewed it, it affirmed it. It had those words in there. And so it made me feel so much better about not overthinking, but really just paying attention.
Yes. And I'm going to go back to this beginning slide that I put in the chat for you. And I'm going to show you again, before we go into the break, what is essential for you in passing the exam. What are the ingredients that go into this particular recipe? Oh, hang on a second. That is the wrong slide. I need to go up a little bit. Right here. This is what the ICF says to us in clear language. What does it look like when the core competency are effectively demonstrated? And this goes to the ICF exam by a coach versus when they're not effectively demonstrated by a coach. That is what you are being tested on. So knowing the languaging of what you're being tested on is super, super helpful, right? And I want to say again, like what goes into the recipe to be successful in this. One, know the ICF core competencies. B, like if you are testing for PCC and MCC in the ICF exam, know the languaging of the PCC markers. Two, be in a coaching mindset, not facilitating, consulting. This is core competency 2. Take the test being in a coaching mindset. 3, know your timing in answering the questions. If you go over time, it's not a good thing. 4, feel confident about your technology. Make an educated decision whether you want to be at home or at the Pearson View Center. And then 5, what we're doing today, know the knack of applying the ICF's core competencies to practical scenarios. And that's what we're going to practice next. It all comes down to that. It's really practical. Any other questions before we take a break?
Uta, this is Veronica. I was just going to put the PCC markers in the chat while we go on break if anybody would like to download them or take a peek.
Awesome. We're going to be a little bit more generous than Pearson View, and we're going to take 15 minutes because, you know, we kind of need to engage. May I suggest you move your body and, you know, do a few things because the next, you know, phase is still going to be intense thinking. So let's kind of reconvene at 15 to the hour. Okay.
And there's one more question in the chat. What was the answer to the last sample question, please?
Okay, thank you. Correct answer was indeed what Jenna and Javier both suggested. The client is seeking clarity or meaning. All right, we'll see each other at 45, okay? Are we ready to go on?
Looks like people are coming back. Welcome back.
Uta, it is so nice to see you again. And I want to echo Xavier in terms of the stellar, stellar job. This is my second time, as you know, sitting through your presentation, and I'm still learning more things. So just, this is one of those for the ages. Continue to watch and watch and watch and watch and watch, because what you deliver, Uta, is really, really, really beneficial. Thank you so much for devoting your time and allowing us to just learn with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. And, you know, just welcoming Anna, you know, like, I don't know how many people listen to you in the break, but we're really glad that you're here with us. We're going to go into the second part. And so even if you're taking the exam at ACC level this time, watching this is going to be very beneficial for you because it is going to go deeper into the knack on how to pass the exam. And yes, Veronica.
Uta, I just wanted to remind everybody to name themselves as they registered for this event. If you are not recorded as being here for the full time, we will not be able to issue CCs for you. So I just want to, if you're changing your name in Zoom to your proper name as registered is really important. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying that, Veronica. Okay, so we're now going to go into the ICF exam that you're taking when you take PCC, when you kind of apply for PCT and or for MCC. And the NAC is in principle the same. There's a few things that we're going to add to it. And so I want to show you what the ICF says. And in their languaging, it becomes really clear what are the requirements for you to pass this exam. So what the ICF says, when they present these sample questions, the following 8 items are representative of the type of questions that may be on the ICF credentialing exam. For each item, the candidate is asked to identify the best and the worst action for the scenario. The questions are designed to measure a candidate's ability to apply updated ICF core competencies in realistic coaching conversations or situations where more than one possible response may be reasonable. Correct responses are shown in bold and italicized. When reading the exam questions, consider of the 4 responses available to choose from, which one is the most aligned with the core competencies, which one is the least aligned. And a hint from me, I had my husband, who is not a coach, accompany me to several, events for the ICF Arizona in person. And he was sitting in the back with one of the organizers and they were giggling. And so at some moment in time, I checked in like, why are you guys giggling? And the ICF organizer said, well, your husband gets about 90% questions right. And the only thing that he does is he has the ICF core competency sheet in front of him and the PCC marker sheet in front of him. And he looks at it and he looks at the verbiage of the question and he's ready to pick out the best answer flawlessly. So there is a knack to this. When you are challenged to answer these 78 scenarios in 2.2 minutes, looking at the language of the scenario is often having clues. So for example, and I'm going to put this in the text in the chat for you. Hang on a second. Oops. I don't know what my computer is doing. Hang on. Ah, there it goes. This is the whole text. And here I want you to read in the chat that last sentence, which I highlighted. A hint. This is not the ICF, this is me. The verbs in the sentence offer great clues when you answer the question for the best choice. So when you see something like ask, pause, acknowledge, invite, reflect, explore, partner, that's direct languaging of the ICF core competencies. When you see something like remind, suggest, explain, teach, share, tell, it's obviously not languaging that the ICF core competence you would be using. So when you are in a scenario and you realize this one is really a doozy, this one is difficult for me, I don't really know what to answer here. Just look at the languaging as far as the best one answer goes, especially if you have less than a minute left. That gives you a really, really good clue. And I got so many email feedbacks on this particular thing. Thank you for telling us to pay attention to the verb, because in about 10 of the 78 scenarios, it really saved me and gave me the best answer somewhere where I didn't really know it. So knowing the timing that you have, 2.2 minutes per question. And if you've been fast before, then you can take a little bit more time for a scenario that you have difficulties with. Knowing the knack of paying attention to the verb can help you tremendously in moving forward with these questions. So I want to kind of do the first question as a test. The first scenario as a test. This is a short scenario, and we are not going to take much time reading it. But still, and I'm going to do that again for the second or third, I want you to read the scenario and then take yourself off mute and say, stop. When you read it, and I'm going to time this with my seconds to see how many people do that in 30, 45 seconds or in a minute, to have a gauge of where you are at as far as timing goes. So even if somebody else has said stop, you still say stop when you've read it. Okay? So here is your first scenario. And so you're reading everything, the scenario and the possible answers. When you're done reading, not answering, but reading, say stop. Got it? Here is the scenario.
Stop.
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 Stop. Stop. Stop.
Stop.
Anyone left still reading? The fastest answer came after about 23 seconds, and the last answer came about 45, 50 seconds. Now keep in mind, this is one of the shorter scenarios. There are some that are much longer. What you're being tested on here is two things. One, how closely do you know the ICF core competencies? And in this case, I would say the PCC markers and also the ICF ethics. And two, how able are you to apply them to actual coaching scenarios? And that is, why I think that the ICF at some moment in time decided to offer the ACC exam, because simply at ACC level, we don't have the experience for many of these scenarios. So it is a little bit more challenging for us to find the best and the worst answer. Now, I'm going to share the screen again, and maybe one of you can work with me on defining the best and the worst answer here. Let's start with the best answer. Who wants to take that? Anyone courageous?
I'll do it.
Awesome.
I was the last one to finish reading, so I'm just making sure I read them all. Number 3 is the best.
What are you basing this on?
No, I'm sorry. I take that back.
Okay.
The last one, D, is the best answer.
How did you just make that decision?
Just from a space of ethics and trust and safety.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Trust and safety is one. Transparency is another one, right? Transparency is another thing that's coming in here. And, you know, just purely for the languaging, share is a really beautiful word that gives you the first indicator just from the verb. And then look at the middle of the sentence and acknowledge, right? Even if you had great difficulties answering this scenario, if you just paid attention to the verb, you already would get a clue here. Share their role as investor and acknowledge the possibility of a conflict of interest. Yes, it kind of absolutely goes into ethics. So let's kind of try on the worst. Which do you think is the worst scenario here? Who wants to take that on? Go ahead.
I can take that one.
Yes.
It's the first one, not say anything.
What makes the first one the worst?
Because I think as a coach, we do have the responsibility to be very honest and transparent when there's a conflict of interest, and not saying anything at all will violate that.
Absolutely. And, you know, just coming back to one knack that I want to log in for you, look at the verb. At least here you have both times share in it. I'm just saying, like, if you struggled with this scenario, you could just go into, okay, these two are obviously somewhere in the middle, not say anything. Let's see, like, what the ICF is saying to this. Yes, so the fourth, share their role as an investor in a competing business and acknowledge the possibility of a conflict of interest with the client is the best answer here. What is the worst action? Not say anything. Try to keep their role as an investor in a competing business separate from their role as a coach. I see you, Natalie. I get to you in a moment. And so I want to kind of link this back into the other neck, which is linking it back into the core competencies. Why? What core competencies are involved here? Demonstrates personal integrity and honesty in interactions with client, sponsors, and relevant stakeholders, right? So very clearly in core competency 1, ethics. And I also have it in core competency 4, demonstrates openness and transparency as a way to display vulnerability and building trust with the client. Those, in my opinion, are two things that are coming in here. Okay, there was a question. Natalie, what was your question?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. My first response was for the right answer was share, the fourth one, but I was confused about the word share because when I took notes, I put it under the words remind, teach, tell, share. And so can you distinguish the difference in the meaning? When you were talking about the verbs, I wrote it down as one not to use, that it was a signal that it wouldn't be a correct answer.
So this is a little bit complicated. So like one of the core competencies, you know, you are being graded on how much time the coach talks in a conversation and how much time the client talks in a conversation. So if you kind of look into sharing like as part of a coaching process, this is an information that needs to be shared. So that is actually a good word to be using. If you kind of use it in teaching or consulting, that would be something that then would be outside the role of a coach. And I kind of want to go back to, give me a second. Is in sharing as, you know, telling. So there is like a sharing where you kind of are open and transparent and you give information, and there's sharing and telling of your expertise, which is leaving the coaching profession and going more into consulting. Does that make sense, Natalie?
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. So it's really to really take the context of the meaning of share in the sentence versus a hard, fast rule.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you
Beautiful.
for explaining that. That was helpful.
Thank you. All right. Now we're going to do the same thing with, give me a second to find the right slide again. We're going to do the same thing with the stop again on question number 2, so that you have one more chance of gauging yourself as far as timing goes. I'm going to introduce scenario number 2. And when you're done reading, say stop, and I'll be paying attention on how much time you need for this particular skill. Scenario number 2.
Stop.
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 Anyone still reading? No. The answers this time took a little bit longer. The scenario is a little longer. And I want you to know there's some scenarios that are much longer than what we did right now. The answers came in between 25 seconds and 1 minute and 5 seconds. So if you know yourself to be a slower reader, you want to consider that. And this is just another area of my own expertise that I want to add. I'm a highly sensitive person, like 25% of the population are. Many coaches are. And so we tend to read a little slower, but more detail oriented than other people. So there is a disadvantage and an advantage in it. If you are highly sensitive and you're working in that particular framework, chances are that you're reading this slower than some of the people that are reading fast, but chances are that you're already processing it in depth. And what I found ultimately between the two groups, the highly sensitive people were much easier than able to answer the scenarios intuitively, while some of the fast track readers had to go back sometimes and read something again when they were giving the answer. So in the end, it kind of evened out. If you noticed, like when you read these scenarios that you're much slower than a minute and a half, or it could also be that you're legasthenic, that you are having some reading issues or other neurodiversity issues, you can go for that exempt accommodation and just say, I'm a really slow reader, or I have some difficulties reading, and then get a reader for you. That is also possible. So in that case scenario, you could be making a case for that. All right, let's go and answer this scenario. So who wants to take it on? I'm going to start with the best answer. Let's look at the best answer. And, like, you don't have to get it right. The point is we discuss it and we sharpen our brain around it. Yes, Nicole. Nikki.
I would say the first one was, if you want to put the questions back up, but it was the second one, B.
Okay, give me a second. Let me put it back on. What makes the second one the best?
Oh, yeah, let's see. Take a breath and acknowledge that the client is responsible for their own choice of whether to follow through with their stated plans or not. That is taking your own emotion out of it and making it client focused and not back to taking your own emotion out of it. So you're not putting praise or disappointment or anything like that on them.
Beautiful. So what you're mentioning here is a good self-management, and that is being said in Take a Breath, right? And then also acknowledge that the client is responsible for their own choices. Okay, let's kind of look at the core competencies that are involved here and what they say in their languaging about this. Core competency 2 develops and maintains the ability to regulate one's emotions, which you just named really beautifully. Core competency 8 acknowledges and supports clients' autonomy in the design of goal, actions, and measures of accountability. Those are the two that I could find that are coming in here. All right, let's kind of look at the worst action here. What are your thoughts?
Can I take that on and explain the way I would struggle with this one?
Yes.
So I would hesitate between 3 and 4, and I think 4 is the worst because 4 is really making the client wrong in many ways, which is something that is really a no-go by any standards of the ICF, anything that we can do in coaching. But 3 is not that great. I mean, even if there's reflection, like to say, oh, by the way, you're going to do that with your mentor coach. I mean, I really don't find really great. So I would struggle here answering the question, like, what is the worst between the two, to be honest?
Yes.
I think it's 4, but 3 is not great.
Yes. So Javier, this is a beautiful, beautiful thing that you're bringing up here. And I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Give me a second. I lost my... Need to kind of slow this. So there is usually a clear, in my view, like a clear best choice. And then there are 2 bad choices and one that is second good. This is the best way that I can describe it. There is one that is clearly outstanding, and then there is one that is like, that's another possible answer. It's not quite as good as the first one. And then there's 2 choices that are bad. And in an MCC mind, they're equally bad. That's kind of where, sometimes the PCC markers can come in, helpful. I want you to know that I don't actually know how the grading happens. This is like secret sauce. We are not given this kind of information, but my hunch is that most likely there is a grading system in place where there is 2 answers that are really not so great. Let me ask you, Javier, if you had to have a choice between 3 and 4 as bad choices, which one would you take? And I'm going to put this back up on screen. And
I
why
would
would
go
you
for
take?
4 because in 4 we really make the client wrong, which is really a no-go, no-go, no-go in any coaching session. And 3 is really, it still invites some reflection and so forth. So it's not great, but it's less evil than the 4th one.
Exactly. So beautifully gauged. Like this is exactly, how I approach the questions. Which one is the worst? The assumption, like, first of all, I'm in a bias. And, part of my coaching, experience is like to be in self-management and not in judgment and bias, right? This is part of core competency 1 and 2, foundation. So praising the client for meeting the project deadlines is me having a bias on it's good to meet the deadline. That's the most important thing. And considering that they failed is judging their choice that they made in the moment and basically evaluating that they failed. And so let's see what the ICF says here. Hang on, question number 2. That's also what they decided. So take a breath and acknowledge that the client is responsible for their own choices of whether to follow through with the stated plans or not. And what's the worst action? Praise the client for meeting the project deadlines, but ask the client why they failed to support their team members' development. And I just want to go into the chat. Yes, Natalie. So this is something that the ICF doesn't bring in, but there's people, many of us have different reading times. And Jennifer says, I have ADHD. I tend to read slow. I was able to get time and a half as an accommodation. Great to know. So Jennifer, how did this work for you? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
When I received my invitation to schedule the exam, no, I'm sorry. I received the email to provide my accommodations first. Once so I had to obviously have a letter from my psychiatrist who diagnosed me. And that letter I had to send ICF. I think it took about a week. They approved those, and then I received my invitation to take the exam, which I am taking in person because I tend to read out loud and I also look up. So
Yes.
I'm taking it in person.
So good to know yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing what the process was. That was really, really helpful. So you sent a letter for the accommodation to the ICF, you got something back, and then you were approved to get half of more time. Good to
Yeah,
know.
I think I have an insane amount of time to take it, which is really, really nice. I essentially have a whole nother extra hour. And I think it doesn't have to be an official diagnosis, but you do have to have documentation from a professional stating that you need this accommodation.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments? Okay, let's go to question number.
I have a quick one. Excuse me, Uta. So I'm curious. Also, does this apply to individuals that may have English as a second language? Would that be considered something to ask for in terms of an accommodation?
I would think so, because, if you are having difficulties with reading, as long as you state so that you're taking it in English, and I do think that the test is available in different languages now. But like if you are having a language that is not part of the languages that it has been translated to, I think that would be definitely an accommodation. I'm not positive about it because I'm not the ICF, but that would be my hunch, okay? My interpretation.
No, I appreciate it.
May I say something? It's a
Yes.
bit like the driver's license in the US. It's better to do it in English than translated. I don't find the translation very good, at least in French. It's not really great.
Right.
If you have enough command of English, I would rather invite you to do the test in English than to try to do it in Spanish, for example, or in any other language. It's not that great, the translation.
Yes. And Jennifer is clarifying here, you can take the test in your native language.
Right. So I think really, and thank you everyone for weighing in. I think really I wanted to kind of understand how to navigate others who might have that question. And if that would be considered an accommodation, like I'm just looking at what are the scenarios that people may want to consider that maybe they didn't think of or even think to ask that might be able to be a consideration. So thank you. And you have also given me a homework assignment. I'll go back and make sure I find out all the different ways people can get qualified if they need an accommodation. Thank you, Uta.
Would you share your homework with me?
Oh, my homework is to go back.
No, like once you found out.
Yes, ma'am. You got it. I will.
Thank you so much. All righty, so let's kind of go to question number 3, and this time we're not going to do the stop thing. We're going to take one other question later, but this one is rather short, so we don't have to do it. Here is scenario number 3.
Stop. Stop. Stop.
Stop.
Alrighty. Who wants to take this one on?
I will if no one's gonna
Awesome.
volunteer.
Yeah.
The correct answer would be acknowledge that the client has shared 3 specific challenges that they're facing and ask the client which one they would like to explore first.
And what makes you go in that direction, Nikki?
It's just kind of, I mean, I guess how my mind works is that you are mirroring back to them that they shared 3 different things. So you're kind of categorizing it, and then you're allowing them to state which one is weighing on them the heaviest that they'd like to talk about first.
And what are you honoring when you do that?
What's on their heart?
Their choices.
Their choices, yes.
So like this was a very beautiful client-centered way to explain it. And I want to kind of say if this is a fairly simple scenario, at least in my mind, right? But in case this was a scenario that you would be struggling with, look at again the verb. Acknowledge, ask, and explore. These are 3 verbs that are really central to the language of core competencies. Let me ask you, Nikki, if that is, still what you want to do. What made you choose that over the other ones? What did you see in the other ones that anyone can jump in? What did you see in the other ones that wasn't as good as this one?
Well, my gut says in the other ones, as the coach is guiding the conversation instead of allowing the client to guide the conversation.
Yes, beautiful. I'm going to kind of ask Javier, as my fellow MCC in here, and the person that is really interested in nuancing.
Yes.
From 1 to 4, how would you nuance these?
What do you put under the word nuance? What do you put under
From best to worst, like best, second best, third best, and worst.
Wow. So first of all, I would say that the first one appeals to me because in some coaching school, we basically learn a skill that's called taking charge when we notice something that we think is beneficial to the coaching session. So I would have struggled a little bit with the best one, to be honest, again here. But again, it's not client focused, huh? And it's maybe one of the difference also between PCC and MCC, where in MCC we've been asked even more to be client focused. So I would go for best, acknowledge for sure, the one you did. Worst, I guess the last one. The worst is the last one. Then I would put the client to share more aging parents, number 3, and number 2, the first one, like that.
Yeah, this is kind of how I would have nuanced them as well. The third scenario, acknowledge that the client has shared 3 significant challenges, is the first one. And to me, that one is rather obvious. Ask the client if they need to take a moment before starting coaching, since they seem to be stressed. It has an assumption in it that they are stressed, right?
Yeah.
But still, like taking a moment with them
Yeah.
to go into space. It's like I would say like probably my second choice. Ask the client to share more about their aging parents. It's like, hey, I'm more interested as a coach in what's happening with your parents than with any of the other scenarios. That's where I want to go, which is coach-centered and not client-centered. So that would be my third one. And then ask the client to begin with the major event that they're planning at work. Since they mentioned that first, that is clear bias, right? So like, I'm going to pick the one that you are going to coach around, and that is, in my book, the least client-centered. So let's look at.
I'm aligned with you, completely aligned. Yeah, in the ranking.
Say that again?
The ranking was the same. We're completely aligned. Yeah.
Yes. So let's look at question number 3. First of all, we kind of look at what the ICF has to say here. And what I did is I underlined the verbiage of it. So acknowledging and asking, right? Is they are both present in that third scenario. So like, just as a hint, if you didn't know and you were really conflicted between two, this would give you another confirmation or another hint. What's the worst action? Ask the client to begin with the major event they're planning at work, since they mentioned it first. And then, I like to bring it back to the core competencies and the language of the core competency. So what is involved here really strongly in the core competency is number 3, having agreements. Partners with the client to reconfirm what they want to accomplish in the session. Partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address to resolve or achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. Partners with the client to define or reconfirm measures of success for what the client wants to accomplish in the coaching engagement or individual session. Partners with the client to manage the time and focus of the session. Continuous coaching in the direction of the client's desired outcome, unless the client indicates otherwise. And all of these statements go into the core competency foundation of being in a coaching mindset, being client-centered rather than coach-centered. Also, I see you, Nikki, and I'm going to come back into you in a moment. Also, core competency 6 reflects or summarizes what the client communicate to ensure clarity and safety. I just heard you mention 3 different scenarios. What are the scenarios that you want us to focus on in this session? Or if you want to focus on all 3 scenarios, how should we split the time between them? Which one do you want to unpack first? All of that, clarifies topic and questions that would go into a client-centered, communication. 5, integrates the client's words, tone of voice, and body language to determine the full meaning of what is being communicated here. And then core competency 7, adjust the coaching approach in response to the client's needs. And again, asking them questions, like there's like 3 different things that are happening. That's a lot, right? So like, what is your main focus first? Like, what is it that you want to unpack? How much time do you want to dedicate it? These questions would really address the client's needs in this conversation, and or invites the clients to generate ideas how they can move forward and what they're willing or able to do later on, when we kind of talk about accountability around these 3 events. Okay, there was a comment. Nikki, I think you had raised your hand, right?
Yeah, I had a question for this exam. Do you know how many we can get wrong, number 1? And number 2, if you get, is there like a partial right? Or if you don't get, like, finding the right answer, that hasn't been a challenge for me, but finding the worst answer takes some extra time for me. So that this last one I felt like was a little bit tricky for me to find the worst answer. So I was just curious, like, do we get a half a point or do we just get it all wrong?
Oh, I wish I was part to having that information about the secret sauce. If you ever find out, would you let me know? I don't know, but I think, if I were the ICF and I kind of would look at what Javier and I were unpacking earlier, that there is a second kind of not perfect, but good answer, and a third really bad, but not the worst answer. I don't know.
I think it works like this. Like if you identify best or worst, you get 1 point. And if you can identify best or worst, you get 1 point. So you either get 0 points or 1 or 2 per question. That's my understanding.
Thank you for explaining that black and white,
That's-
Javier.
yeah.
Let me kind of look at this.
Okay, so to mirror that back, it's either the question points are either 0 to 2.
Correct.
If you
That's
get
what I
them all
understood.
right, then you get a
Yes.
2. If you get one of the answers right, you get a 1.
Correct. That's
Thank
what I
you.
understood.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
want
for
to acknowledge,
so
Nikki,
for
that go
so
ahead.
for clarity, I will find out because we ICF Global does have a credentialing version. It is not like yours, Uta. So let's just be clear. It is not this. However, they do have some sort of credentialing exam prep call. And so my understanding is, you really have to find the answer that they're looking for. But Nikki, what I will do, because these are great questions, I will make sure that I go back again, add this to my homework and really get clear of some of these specifics and then get that information out.
Thank you, Anna. And I'm in your chapter too. So thank you. Thank you, President.
You're welcome. Welcome.
The second question was, how many can we get wrong?
That is a really brilliant question. And I knew the answer, but I didn't put it into my presentation. And I'm an old lady, so I forgot. I will have to look that up and let you know. Jenna, you mentioned this at some moment in time. Was it like 75%, something like that? I forgot. So
that's okay, Uta. We got you. We'll get it. All this is getting recorded. So, and the programming team is on the call. We'll get the answers that everybody needs. Thank you, Uta. And we'll send it to you. We'll make sure you have it also.
Awesome. And, just to kind of mention this again, the one statistic that I took from it that was important to me, 76% passed the first time, and all over the passing level is somewhere between 91 and 93%. Go ahead, Veronica.
I just wanted to mention there's a question from Latanya in the chat. For question 2, does taking a moment mean coach doing so with the client, or could it mean taking a moment alone?
Does the group mind want to answer here?
I would say, since it's not stated, you can't assume one or the other.
So if we don't assume it's one or the other, would it still be closest to right? It was listed as number 2.
Yes, like I'm assuming that they're in a coaching conversation, so taking a moment would apply for both of them, kind of tuning in. Let me kind of go back to the question number 2. What is your question here, Natalia?
So my question is, it was mentioned that number 2 would be the closest to second, correct? And in America, a lot of times, especially in the younger generations, taking a moment has a negative connotation to it, like, oh, do you need a moment away from the situation and then to come back? So it has a negative connotation towards it.
Oh, so it goes into bias and judgment.
Correct.
Interesting. Very good observation. I don't think that is what the ICF had in mind, that it was kind of a bias. But very interesting observation. There is a negative connotation in the younger generation around that. Thank you for adding that.
It's just difficult, when people read a question like that, and maybe they're informed that way, they wouldn't see it the way that the NCC saw it, and so they might answer differently.
Interesting. Thank you for that input. Jennifer, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question about the 2 worst. So I guess I'm just really struggling with that one because one of them, what is it? One of them was tell me about your parents, your aging parents. And then the other one was tell me, I can't remember what the scenario was, but you mentioned this one first. So I'm struggling to see how one is worse than the other.
Hang on, which question are we in?
The one about them being stressed.
question 3.
Question 3, give me a second. Yes.
Sorry, yeah, it's question 3.
So the 4th one was the worst, according, to the ICF. Why is that one worse than asking the client to share more about their aging parents?
Okay. I think I just answered my own question.
So what would you answer?
Because if you're asking the client to share more about their aging parents, you're still coming from a space of curiosity, you're still open. Whereas ask your client to begin with the major event, you're telling them where we're going.
Yes.
We could still be just, you could notice the energy around aging parents. Maybe I just needed to see it again. Sorry.
No, this is great. I have had that scenario being questioned by many coaches, is it really worse? And, you explained it perfectly, you nuanced it perfectly. Yes. Since they mentioned that first, is very clear bias, very clear telling.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
All right. So, give me a second. I'm going to pull up scenario number 4. Now, for scenario number 4, I am going to one more time invite you to say stop, because scenario number 4 is longer. And so you're going to have, from what the feedback was that I got, about a third of the scenarios at the length that you're going to get in this one. And so I want to kind of do this one more time. When you're done reading it, say stop, and I'm going to time. Go ahead.
Stop.
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 The average time for you reading, where most people came in, was about 50 seconds on this one. And there was another few of you that kind of took up to 115 to 120. So that is really, really good to keep in mind. When you have a question that is this long, now you have about, if you kind of took a minute and 15 seconds, you have 45 seconds to find the right answer. Yes. So that kind of gives you a little bit around the neck of timing. And I want to kind of look at the new messages in the chat.
Yes, and Catherine put a spot on answer to one of the scoring questions. Of course, she gave us a little bit of a heads up because she got her results. So thank you, Catherine. I'm still going to do some research though, so I can try to make sure people can do some research for themselves if they need to. But this is fantastic. Thank you.
This is kind of like, it's all back end stuff, but my understanding also is that, like this 460, so therefore they're weighting them. It's not on a specific, there's 81 questions, or 78 questions, this is the score. So there's clearly some weighting to how they're providing the answers and how they're applying a score to it. But that's the actual, how you get 200 out of 78, we don't know.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much for, giving us that. I want to check in on one of the necks with you guys before we go on. What are you learning about the length of reading versus the length of answering? What decisions are you making for yourself around that?
I know for me that I spend more time reading to making sure I'm comprehending everything. And I find that if I spend more time reading, then the answer kind of comes quick, because as I'm reading, I'm like sifting through, like, the which one would be the best and which one would be the worst. And then that, like, the latter time is more of, do you feel 100% about your answer?
Awesome. Great decision. Anyone else has something to, yes, Veronica?
I'm a slower reader, and when I took the first half of the exam for the first section, I found myself really looking into the details because I'm also very detail oriented. I looked at the detail and I gave merit to everything in the question. But then I ran out of time. I didn't answer 3 questions. And then in the second half, I said to myself, you know what, read the question briefly, pick out the most important piece, go to the answers. And if you need to go back and reflect on the actual question, go ahead and do that. So I was able to really speed up my process by taking out part of what the question was and getting to the real meat of what the question was. That make sense?
Perfect sense. And Javier, what is it that you want to say here?
Let's face it, we're under high levels of stress when we take an exam. That's just a fact, but at least that's me. So I have cortisol really high, and my reading abilities are getting affected. Like really, I read, but I don't really read. So usually I read the first time, answers, then I reread to make sure I understood, and then I start answering, trusting that some of the cases that are going to come later on are going to be quicker, especially when I'm facing a very long case. That all in all is going to compensate. And my experience is that it does. And that some questions I were able to answer much faster because they were easy cases. And some cases, they were much more difficult. But for the difficult ones, I stayed a little bit longer because I thought it was worth it to really understand what I was being asked and get rid of the stress and the mental freeze I was experiencing.
So as a tip for everyone, how do you navigate, or like, do you have a tip for the others? Like, how do you navigate these raised cortisol levels in yourself, which is going to be true for all of us, right? You unmute, Javier. You have to take yourself off mute.
I think other people wanted to answer as well. So breathing, oxygenating, breathing. If you are in the room, persons, you can actually move a little bit on your chair, so you have more maybe room to change your body position as well. So making sure that you're not stuck into, oh, I don't understand, this question, which I can be sometimes.
Yes, beautiful thing. Diaphragmatic breathing, breathing presence in and breathing out any tension that we have during the exam may come in incredibly handy. The other thing, like what you're going to have is in the recording, the first 10, 15 minutes before the exam, listening to that and setting yourself in that coaching mindset in a relaxed state, client-centered, may be helpful or has been reported back by many to me as a really, really successful practice. Anna, Leslie, Susie.
So you and I touched on this when I took the class the first time, and I'm also in the I'm a PCC in the assessor training. And one of the things I noticed is in terms of taking the exam or answering these questions, because I'm an experience, right? I'm a coach. I'm an experiential coach. So I will read the questions based on my experience of real life coaching sessions, right? So I've had to adjust to focusing on the specifics of the question. And as you said, tie it to the definition and the competencies, versus if a client came to me talking about they had to handle their team leadership issues and their parents just died and they're crying on the phone, I'm probably not going to say, well, you've mentioned a lot of things, where do you want to start?
Yes. And so like,
I'm going to be with, they're crying on the phone about their parent. So that was, these are things I wanted to bring it up because these are things that I had to realize that the test is not always real life scenario. It's the test.
yes, so like what you are naming so beautifully here, the ICF exam is about 50-50, more or less, right? And you are really strong in the 50 because you have so many coaching sessions as an experience, which is what I know about you. You have so many years of experience as a coach, which is what an ACC would struggle with. So your strength that you're naturally bringing in is the practical experience. And so what you're adding is the 50% of really reading the languaging of the core competency and the PCC markers to go, okay, it's somewhere between those two, and as I combine them, then I get the right thing. But it's great
Exactly.
that you know your strengths like that.
That's true. However, I may flunk the test. So I just have to make sure that I stay with, this is the test, like the specifics, the details, the definition. So it's great to go through this, Uta, because I can kind of understand how to pull myself out to observe everything for a test and then realize, okay, there's the practical application in real life. And that may not be the 1, 2, or 3 may not be the right answer. So thank you.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to say. And I wanted to bring that up if anybody else was struggling with that.
Well, and I want to acknowledge that you are very, very close, like a millimeter away from your MCC. And so, this third depth level thinking, I explained that earlier, has tripped some of us up in taking the exam. And so for you to add the level of the PCC markers in and the language of the PCC markers, and you did the PCC marker training already, which I know, right? To take that in as another gauge, because the exam is not written with the MCC bars in mind. The exam is written so that a PCC coach can pass it. And so tuning into that particular level for somebody that is a hair width away from their MCC is another way of crystallizing that and fine-tuning that. Yes, Nikki, it's only important to focus on the best answer and the worst answer. Susie, you had your hand up, I think. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I was going to share also some of my strategies with dealing with these tests and the stress. I've taken similar tests like for HR and for interpreting, and it's very stressful. But one, like Xavier said, breathing, meditating, like really centering myself. I love the meditation you did at the beginning today. Second, and this is probably crazy, but I sit in my car before I go in and I'll repeat 10 times, I can do this. I can do this. I start very hesitant, but by the 10th time I say it, I can do this. I am confident that I got this. And lastly, and this is very unconventional, but it works for me. I listen to Eminem's Lose Yourself. It kind of pumps me up. I know it's very unconventional, but it really just gives me that extra push, like I got this. And yeah, I like after that, that's my ritual. And then I feel very confident.
Anna says, as a former hairstylist, I relate it to getting your cosmetology license versus long back practice. It's two different boxes. Awesome. I love your practice, especially the eminence thing. I think I'm going to kind of use that. That's also, like there's one tool in the neck that I'm giving you at the very beginning of this workshop, which is the meditation practice. So, like really kind of going into using this practice for setting myself up in a coaching mindset, setting myself up in embodying being a coach, which is core competency 2, one of the foundations. And from that space, tuning into these scenarios has made it much easier for many people. I would say we're going to take one more question. Okay, Leslie, go ahead. Leslie, go ahead. Leslie, did you have your hand raised?
I think she's trying to type something in
I
the
knew
chat.
I
Okay,
did.
she's got it.
Okay, awesome.
I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a hotel room right now. We just found out that our water's been shut off. So I'm a little bit distracted and I apologize for that. But one of the things that I want to learn from a very basic ACC is this has been a really good lesson for me to learn to relax. And like Javier said, breathe before we start doing that. I think that that's the most important thing in answering these questions too, is take a breath and just relax and then start reading it. And so anyway, I just wanted to, if anybody else is having that struggle, because when we first went through the questions, I panicked that I wasn't going to be able to finish reading the questions in time. So yeah, so now I know a little bit more about myself and I can relax into you're fine. But thank you.
So in a way, Leslie, this is beautiful for me to hear. There's one more thing that we need to add into the recipe of the knack, which is using relaxation strategies, whether you listen to eminence or you breathe or you stretch the body or whatever it is that it takes for you to reset yourself into a coaching mindset. And, it goes to one of our core competencies, which is self-management. Yes. So this is one of the things, like sometimes we arrive in a coaching situation, we were just in a traffic jam and we were almost late coming home, and then something happened with the dog and the cat and we are like, "Rrr," and now we're giving a coaching session. So self-management is definitely something that is being asked for in this coaching scenario. And Jenna says, "You've got this," to Jennifer, who's taking your PCC exam on Wednesday. So this has been super supportive. We have a little bit more time. So I would say we're going to take on one more question and then we're going to go into feedback, and we're maybe not spending, as much time. We already read question number 4. So let's go into answering it. Who wants to take this one on?
I'll do it.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to do it anyway. I'm going with D. No. Maybe I don't want to do this one.
What is your hesitation? Can I ask?
I don't feel like I got the question fully. Like I'm noticing that I'm like, oh, I don't know that I totally have all this yet.
Okay.
Like the actual question and the answers.
So like, I'm going to ask you to apply one of the knacks.
Okay.
So this is a beautiful example. You really don't get this. Now, if you only paid attention for the verbs in the possible answers and you had nothing else and you have 10 seconds left to make a decision, which one is most aligned with ICF verbiage?
I'm leaning towards A. The only thing I don't like about that is that it's like a closed-ended question.
Okay. And what makes you lean toward A language-wise?
Just the acknowledging, reflecting, asking them if they're comfortable and exploring.
Yes. Acknowledge, ask, explore are definitely 3 words that appear over and over in the languaging of the ICF core competencies. So if this was a scenario where you would be like, my cortisol is spinning out of control, I've been reading this question, I have no idea what this question is about, and I have like 10 seconds to answer, pick A.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Awesome. Anyone else that wants to come in and unpack that a little bit? All right, I'll unpack my thoughts on this. How is that? Acknowledge the reflection work that the client has done and ask the client if they feel comfortable exploring some of the emotions they describe in their journal is really, in my book, a very good answer because it completely puts them a choice. I acknowledge, first of all, that they did really hard work in preparing for this session. And I'm asking them whether they would want to take this as a topic or whether they would feel comfortable to take this on as a topic, which is a trust and safety question. And also kind of putting the client a choice. Ask the client if they would summarize the entries they detailed in their journal for the coach. And that's basically saying, client, I'm a lazy coach. I'm not going to take the, I mean, in my interpretation, yes, this is Uta. I'm not going to take the time to read your journal. So could you just summarize this for me so that I kind of can catch up what you're actually doing here? That would be something in my book that would go against trust and safety because now my client can really not trust that I'm fully leaning into the coaching process. That would be my evaluation. Ask the client to identify some steps they can take to overcome the anxieties they wrote about. Yes, and one, I'm dangerously close to a therapist's territory. Overcoming anxiety isn't my forte, and I'm accessing their wisdom, but it kind of puts me on a dangerous path. And also it basically skips a whole part of the coaching process. I haven't asked them to explore the topic or where they want to go with the session. I kind of go, okay, can you give me some solutions on how to pass your anxiety? Which is, I'm assuming that is what they actually really want to talk about. And then ask the client what new awareness they developed about themselves through the journaling process is actually a good answer. It's maybe not the best answer, but it kind of leads me into exploring what the topic could possibly be for the client. What have you discovered about yourself? And yet a little bit I'm taking charge in this question on the coaching process. Let's just see what the ICF has to say here. Best action. Acknowledge the reflection work that the client has done and ask the client, and I underlined the verbiage exploring, I forgot to underline the client, if they feel comfortable about exploring some of the emotions that they described in their journal. And what's the worst action according to the ICF? Ask the client to identify some steps they can take to overcome the anxieties they wrote about, which is I'm sending the agenda. You have to overcome your anxieties. And also I've skipped through the whole exploration of the topic of where the client actually wanted to go with their session, right? Let's just go and look at the core competencies involved here. Core competency 6, communicating effectively, listens actively. Definition focuses on what the client is and is not saying to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client system and this will support client expression. Reflects or summarizes what the client communicated to ensure clarity and understanding. Recognizes and inquires when there is more to what the client is communicating. Notices, acknowledges, and explores the client's emotions, energy shifts, nonverbal cues, or other behaviors. And core competency 4, trust and safety. Coach cultivates trust and safety. Definition, partners with the client to create a safe, supportive environment that allows the client to share freely, maintains a relationship of mutual respect and trust. Me saying to the client, come on, client, sum this up for me. Don't make me read this thing. Isn't really supporting trust and safety in my book, right? Acknowledges and respects the client's unique talents, insights, and work in the coaching process. Wow, that was an amazing, accountability for you to write this much in your journal and bring this to your coaching session. Show support, empathy, and concern for the client. you and I, we've discussed in, previous sessions that sometimes it is hard for you to name things in a communication, and yet I want to acknowledge what an amazing job you did, naming what you're experiencing in your written journal. Where do you want to go with that? Yes. So those would be the two core competencies that, I would be highlighting here in bringing into this experience. And there were two new messages. What are some other resources for practicing test questions? I think that this is pretty much as good as it gets. And Elizabeth, thank you very much. This was terrific and enlightening. I have to leave now. And Veronica actually gives you another thing with the coaching, with the ICF ethics. You're going to get these handouts, the ethics, the PCC markers, and the CC core competencies. I also put quite a few links in the chat earlier, and you're going to get the chat, so the links are going to be in there. You can later on go into researching where the ICF exam manual is, where the ACC exam manual is. But I want to use these last couple of minutes to just, if you want to post something in the chat or say something, what is the main takeaway that you're taking from this presentation today? Let's take yourself on mute and blurt out, and I'm seeing some of them also in the chat.
We had nuance and verbiage as a comment. Client
Yes.
mode. Less uncertainty about the unknown. Really pay attention to the verbs. Trust intuition.
Yes. And I'm going to post one more time the secret sauce of really passing this exam. Oops. And I'm going to put that for you one more time in the chat. And the one thing that we're adding to this is manage stress. Manage your cortisol levels and listen to eminence. I didn't put that in there. Calm my nerves about taking the exam. Also look at the verbs, center self, pay attention. And PCC markers, best and worst answers. Awesome. It was an absolute delight unpacking this with you as a group today. And I'm always happy. I'm actually going to put my email. If you ever wanted to kind of give any results from the test that you felt I would benefit from having, either technical challenges or things that you overcame, I'm going to put my email address for you into the chat. This is really helpful for me to up my there is to up my skill level. And you can also feed back to anyone at the High Country ICF or San Diego ICF, and they can kind of forward that to me.
Thank you so much, Uta, for your wonderful information today.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us. I hope you found it valuable.
Thanks, Uta.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, sehr geschätzt.
Thank you for the feedback, you guys.